The 3rd century BC, Rome has fought its way to a position of global predominance. Complacent about its military superiority, Rome challenges its mighty neighbour Carthage, and in the First Punic War takes its colonies. But the Romans did not reckon with Hannibal. This son of a Carthaginian field marshal promises his father that he will make Rome tremble before him. Then in 221 BC, the 26-year-old Hannibal makes a bold move. He lays siege to Saguntum, an ally and protectorate of Rome, in an obvious act of provocation. The Romans cannot let this impudence go unchallenged. War wages once again between Carthage and Rome. The Battle of Saguntum kicks off one of the most famous wars of antiquity. The two civilizations are fighting for nothing more and nothing less than global supremacy. In 218 BC, Hannibal heads towards southern France with a contingent of 40,000 men, 4,000 horses, and 37 war elephants. He has to keep the Romans occupied, or the legionaries will soon be battering down the gates of Carthage. His advance enables him to dictate when and where the two sides will engage in battle. The Romans follow in hot pursuit and wait in ambush close to the site of present-day Marseille. But Hannibal doesn't appear. The shrewd tactician has evaded his foes and is already moving towards Italy. Hannibal has a very special ace up his sleeve, his war elephants. They are to clear the way by mowing down enemy troops. But first the adventurers have to face a different opponent: the Alps. The legend of Hannibal's passage through the Alps endures to this day. The massive ponderous beasts had to be led through 2,000-meter-high mountain passes. This was an ambitious and arduous undertaking. Large amounts of winter clothing, food and weapons had to be hauled up the steep slopes. The only paths through the mountains are rough tracks where men and animals have to move forward in single file. As a result, the troops become strung out across a distance of many miles, and progress is slowed. This is an unacceptable development for Hannibal. He divides his troops into two and sends them on different routes. One to the south, along the Durance, the other to the north, through the Isère Valley. The army thus manages to cross the Alps relatively quickly. Yet what began as a stroke of genius turns into a fiasco during the descent from the foothills. Hannibal loses almost a quarter of his troops and most of his elephants. In the end, Hannibal achieves his goal. He and his army are on Italian soil, and for a good few years the Carthaginians keep the proud Romans on their toes within their own dominions. But the question of which of the two powers is to ultimately emerge victorious is yet to be answered. Having crossed over the Alps, Hannibal begins a victory march through northern Italy. The Romans suffer one defeat after another. Hannibal uses cunning and vicious tactics to repeatedly ambush his enemy. He exploits the element of surprise and his troops' flexibility.
Hannibal won the major battles by relying predominantly on his mobile forces, not just on his phalanx of infantry.
Dark-skinned Numidian cavalrymen, Spanish Celts, Greeks in heavy armour, Gauls, and a particularly fierce group of warriors from the Balearic Islands who entered battle with bast fibre slingers. This weapon is fatally precise. The Carthaginians are battle-weary, but they can expect no help. This leaves only one option: be more clever than the enemy. The Romans, on the other hand, rely on sheer numbers. They bombard the Carthaginians with waves of fresh legions. Their clashes culminate in the Battle of Cannae, still taught as the hallmark example of encirclement warfare at military academies. Despite the Romans' superior numbers, Hannibal routs them with his tactics. 1/3 of Rome's available military manpower is annihilated. It looks as if Hannibal cannot be stopped. But suddenly, history reshuffles the cards. The Roman Senate appoints Scipio as general. he has a plan to defeat Hannibal. Scipio ignores Hannibal and his troops in Italy, occupying Carthage's Iberian colonies, whose silver mines provide the lifeblood of Hannibal and his troops. A package arrives at the Carthaginian camp for Hannibal containing his brother's head, a sign that the Romans are now calling the shots. Scipio has landed in North Africa. His army is a day's march from Carthage. Suddenly, Carthage itself is at risk. Hannibal now wishes to negotiate, but Scipio declines. The decisive clash takes place on the battlefield at Zama. This time, the Romans employ wiser tactics. After so many victories, Hannibal pays for his only defeat with Carthage. Hannibal flees, spending 20 years on the run, only to take his own life far from his homeland, from which he was banished. The victory over Carthage is the beginning of Rome's ascent to world dominance. While Scipio spared the North African city, his political successors want revenge. Almost 40 years after Hannibal's death, Rome declare war on Carthage once again. When the bloody massacre is over, nothing is left but absolute destruction. A terrible irony of history, the fall of the Carthaginian Empire, a result of Hannibal's conquests.
In the southern Italian village of Campo di Mela, the clock seems to tick differently. The people here live to an exceptional age, around 30 years longer than the average Italian. What's more, the people in this village of longevity remain healthy in mind and body until well into old age. What's their secret? Aldo Lisetto, former police chief in Rome, is trying to find out. For years, he's been collecting data and studying the evidence. In 1987, he published his findings in a book about this astonishing mountain village. The Roman, who has now been elected mayor of Campo di Mela, believes that the inhabitants' longevity is a direct result of their diet. Campo di Mela is a farming village. Here, 5 generations of the same family work side by side in the fields, living off what they yield, pure organic produce. The villagers eat vast quantities of fresh vegetables, including many varieties that ceased to be cultivated in most regions long ago. Scalonga, for example, a type of onion that is no longer found anywhere outside Campo di Mela. This bygone bulb contains substances which aid digestion and strengthen the immune system. In this village of centenarians, the people eat very little meat, but tuck into a great deal of homemade maize bread. Campo di Melians consume gallons of cold-pressed olive oil, an average of 0.2 litres per person per day. That's about a normal drinking glass full. Researchers believe that the oil promotes health and prolongs life, as it contains monosaturated fats, which reduce the risk of coronary heart disease and cancer. Indeed, the sprightly population of Campo di Mela has virtually no experience of heart disease. Yet the villagers themselves believe another liquid is their elixir of life. They drink a glass of red wine with every meal. And it turns out that their long-held supposition is correct. Dietitians have now discovered that red wine not only contains beneficial trace elements, but that when drunk in accompaniment with a healthy meal, it promotes the absorption of important vegetable nutrients. The village has a population of 800. Of these, 120 are over the age of 80, 42 are over 90, and several have reached the grand old age of 100 and beyond. Maybe the villagers have found the secret of longevity.